Good morning and welcome to the Veterans Forum. This program is coming to you from the Veterans Hospital here in Manchester, New Hampshire. My name is Bob Stevens. I've been producing the show now for about 10 years. In that time, we've talked with all kinds of guys and gals. The idea is this program was set up by the Library of Congress back in the year 2000, wherein they've asked stations at the community level if they could and will offer their talent and their services so that any guy or gal who wanted to share their experiences could do so in a televised interview. That data will be forwarded to the Library of Congress for a permanent record base. What we're trying to do is to, if you will, record history, but we're doing it by the people who made that history so that there's nothing false or phony put on. Each of the guys and gals who do come and do the show, we're quite surprised at first, oh, it's going to hurt. No. What we're doing is recording history by the people who made it. Everybody wasn't Audie Murphy. The bottom line, quite simply, is this. If you had a job to do and you did it, that's fine. The problem, though, if you do not share that in a view as we're doing right now, that is lost forever. One of the guys that I interviewed one time, the POW group, said, this is perhaps the best legacy I can leave my family. Think about it. If you don't tell your story, though, nobody else will, and we've lost it. Now today, before I start, I would like to share that I'd be flagging this thing around. It's this new system, a telephone link throughout the state, New Hampshire, 211. It's been set up for any veteran or some of his friends if they think he or she may need some help. You can't read this, but on the back there's some 28 or 29 different groups and people who are there to try to help you whatever it is. You have to ask for it, though. The only requirement, you must have had at least 6 months active service and an honorable discharge. It's there to use, and if you need it, it could be the best program you ever made. Now, let me put this thing down. Today we have another young fellow who goes back a couple of years. I'm going to ask Don to introduce himself, and then we'll get the show on the road. Are you ready? We are. Don, would you tell us who you are, your name, spell your last name for the record, where you now live, and your dates of service and your branch of service?
My name is Don Williams. I'm 42 years old now.
You're how old?
92 years old.
What's 50 years among friends? Okay. Where do you live?
I live in Deerfield, New Hampshire.
Okay.
And I've lived here for about 24 years now.
Going to make it permanent, I guess.
I guess it is, yes.
Okay. Now, what's your branch of service and your service dates?
I was in the engineers, combat engineers, and I was drafted out of Fort Dix, New Jersey.
When?
In July of 1950. No, July of 1943.
Three? Oh, it's a good time.
And
when did you get out?
I got out in 1945.
Good.
And I graduated from school in.
Whoop. Wait a minute. I will try to give you a couple of questions, and then you answer them as best you will. What I'd like to do, now we know who you are and what you're doing today, I want to go back and find out how you got here. For example, you started it. Where and when were you born? What was your life like growing up? Did you have a good family, small family, any of your friends in the service and so forth? And what was it like in school? Were you a good student, active in sports? What made you when you were a kid?
Well, I was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey in Christmas time.
Christmas time or Christmas Day?
Christmas Day.
That's even closer.
In 1924.
Okay.
And in those days, they had maternity homes in the neighborhood where you were. My mother got up early in the morning and said to my father, "You better start the car because I'm about ready." So he went downstairs, and she came down 20 minutes later with an overnight bag and said, "Well, I'm all ready, so let's go." He says, "I can't get the car started," and cranking him because in those days you didn't have a button to push. Yeah. So she turned around and said, "Well, I'm going without you." So she walked 6 blocks to the maternity home.
Left him there?
Left him there. And that's where I was born in Elizabeth, in a snowstorm.
Okay.
It's a snowstorm, too. And I went to local schools there through the 5th or 6th grade. And then
Oh, do you have any brothers or sisters
I
or
have
anything
one
like that?
brother. He's 4 years older than I.
Okay.
And we lived in the Elizabeth, in the Elmora section. And when I went through 1st grade, my father worked locally, but we moved to Hillside, New Jersey. And I transferred to Pingree School, which was a private school, and started the 1st grade all over again, and went through the 12th grade there, and graduated from Pingree in 1943, and went into the Army. I graduated in June, June, and then middle of July, I was a private in the Army because I got drafted.
Well, let's back up a little bit because you're knocking
I'm
big
jumping
chunks
too
of time.
fast.
What was your childhood like? What kind of things did you do? What kind of games did you play? Were you good in school? On sports? Did you play basketball, football, hunting, skiing, whatever? What was you?
I wasn't big enough to play football.
Oh.
I weighed about 150 pounds, 155 pounds, and about 5'8". And so, but I did play baseball.
Okay.
And I was pretty good in baseball. I had a strong arm, so I was an outfielder, and I played right field. And I caught a ball one day that was hit by a guy from Edison Vocational High School, and the ball was going to surely be a home run. And so I turned around, started running back, and just at the last minute, I turned my head to see where the ball was coming. It was getting ready to hit me in the head. So I put my hand up real fast and caught the ball.
Yeah, you were defending yourself, not being a
I was
ball player.
defending myself. But everybody, there were 2 men on base from Edison, and they had already started running home.
Football, eh?
Well, I threw the ball to second base, and the guy hadn't gotten back yet fast enough, so he was out. And the guy that was on third base, he didn't get back fast enough. And catching the ball was 3, so I made 3 outs at once.
You must have got a big write-up in the paper.
Everybody thought I was just the best, but I was really trying to protect myself.
Well, you never know how it's going to come out.
And then, well, I went into the Army. Then I was drafted and went into the Army through Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Now, question I ask everybody. How did you feel when you went from civilian to GI into Fort Dix? And the first couple of days there, did you feel in control of the things, completely buffaloed, or just what the heck?
Well, I felt very excited. It was a new atmosphere for me, a whole new life, living with other soldiers. And all of us were draftees, so we had something very much in common. And I just was ready to accept anything that they threw at me, because I knew I was going to be in the Army till the war was over. And I just accepted everything the way it was.
Did your clothes fit you when you started down that long line?
They did. They everything fit right. I had
Okay.
pants and shirts, and everything fit right. My shoes fit right. And I was sent to Fort Eustis, Virginia, for anti-aircraft for my basic training.
Well, how did you get selected? Did you have a contract when you signed in, or
No.
they just say, okay, you're going there, period?
That's what they said.
Okay, you
They
volunteered.
sent me down there,
All right.
and so I took a basic training in Fort Eustis, Virginia. And while I was there, the Army started a program called the ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program, similar to the Navy's V-12, where they send you to college and you take engineering courses at college and then you graduate. In the Navy, they were coming out as ensigns.
Yeah.
In the Army, they come out as second lieutenants.
Oh, Butterbar.
Yeah. So I started my courses in ASTP, and got about halfway through, and there was an invasion of North Africa, and they needed more troops than they needed pencil pushers in college. So they disbanded that program and sent me to back into the service, and I was sent to the 69th Infantry Division in Camp Shelby, Mississippi. And I just started taking another basic training in the infantry. And at that time, they were activating a new combat engineer battalion at the same post at the Camp Shelby. And they needed some draftees, but they also needed some people that would sort of act as cadre with the new inductees coming in. So I was transferred to the 298th Engineer Combat Battalion to take another training through there, but at the same time I was training in engineering practices like assembling a Bailey bridge is put together like an erector set,
Okay.
and the ponton bridges and those things. But I also had learned to operate the .30 caliber machine gun. I did that when I was in the 69th Infantry.
So it carried on.
So carried on, and I acted as an instructor in the .30 caliber machine
Did
gun.
you stripe?
No, because I was still a private then.
Just thought I'd
But,
ask.
but I taught the troops how to assemble and and put together the machine gun, the .30 caliber machine gun. And when our training was over there, we were shipped overseas out of Upton, Camp Upton, New York. And we were shipped to England because the English built
No, the question, when you went over, how did you go? By boat, airplane?
by boat.
How was the trip over? How long and what kind of a new experience did you
The
have?
ship was an Italian luxury cruiser.
Oh, everybody has stateroom and private berth and all.
Well, we didn't have a stateroom. I guess maybe the officers did, but they had a mess hall that they had barracks hanging all over the place. So the whole troop ship was filled with GIs, infantry.
Were they stacked bunks?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, 5, 6 high.
And we were shipped over to England first because the English had a bridge comparable to our Bailey Bridge. They put it together like an erector set, but the parts were a little different. So we had to take a little extra training in the English Bailey Bridge, because in action, the quartermaster, they delivered sections of the bridge to us when we needed it to put up over a river, and we never knew whether they were going to.
So you had, either way, you were
They were going to
qualified.
send us
Now,
to
did they have
English
the
Bailey?
British train you, or did you have your own guys trained and then trained you?
No, we had our own guys,
Okay.
our own officers. So we took some training in the English Bailey Bridge, and went over to France and landed in Le Havre, and went from Le Havre by truck up to the front line area in France. And we started working on projects, engineering projects. This was behind the front line. That was a little bit ahead of us, forward of us. But it became this winter now, and it's in December, and our line covered an area that went into the Alsace-Lorraine area, which separates Germany from France. And our troops were in Alsace then, and the 28th Division had been on the line there for quite a while. And this is in December now, and the temperature was was below freezing every day.
What'd you sleep in? Any bunks or barracks, pup tents or what? Houses?
When we went there, we climbed up one mountain to relieve a battalion of infantry from the 28th Infantry Division that had been on the line there for a month, and they needed
an hour.
a rest. So our troops went up, and my company was Company A of the 290th Engineer Battalion. We had a certain area that we were responsible for, a couple thousand feet of frontage. And we went up, and I walked over to a fellow who was in a foxhole. He got out, we shook hands, and he went back down the mountain,
And you stayed.
and I went into his foxhole, where I stayed for a month. And I had a 30 caliber machine gun that I was responsible for there.
Now, how would they sit along the line? Every 400 or 500 feet, 100 yards, so that you had good communication?
Our positions were maybe 500 feet apart, all along the line.
Okay.
And this was Company A in the 290th
Are you under
Battalion.
fire at all times?
We were responsible for that machine gun position, and the Germans were across. This was on a plateau across the foothills to the Vosges Mountains, and they were on the other side of the plateau in wooded area, and there was like a farmland in between their area and ours that the farmers used to plant wheat or something like that in the summertime. And
Do you have to make any patrols across that?
we had patrols that went back and
Scouting?
forth
Yeah.
continuously. But at one point, the 7th Army, I think it was under Patton, decided it was time to move forward. And this was in January of 40,
44 about.
yeah,
Okay.
about there. And they said, but we have to get some more information because there was just artillery duels during the daytime. There was infantry just were staying in their foxholes because there was a foot of snow on the ground and
Trying
the
to keep
temperature
warm
was
and
zero
comfortable.
almost. So the Germans' artillery, heavy artillery, was back there lobbing their weapons towards us, and we were trying to find out where they were so we could shoot them. But
Shoot them back.
we had to send out some patrols to find out where the location of their heavy artillery. So I was sent out with a patrol, 4-man patrol, to get into an area where I could locate these artillery pieces. And I started across this field. It was at noon in the daytime. But it's a foot of snow, and it's still below zero, or
Now,
very cold.
did you guys ever have any problems with frostbite?
I got frozen feet, yeah,
Yeah.
which was taken care of later on. But we got across the wooded area, and there was, as I approached it, there was a stone wall like you see here in New Hampshire to separate properties.
Yeah.
And on the top of the fence there, I could see there was a barrel of a machine gun. So there was a German foxhole right on the other side, and with their machine gun pointing at us. So we came up. This was in daylight, and they had 2 guys in their foxhole because they don't come out in the daytime either. And so we got over there, and I took the sheet off the top of their thing, the camouflage sheet off, and they came up with their hands up. And I sent those 2 guys back with the fourth guy in my line to
Were you the
prisoners.
squad leader?
Well, I led the patrol, yeah.
Okay.
And so we went on farther in through the woods to get over to the other side where I could look down into the valley, because that's where the big guns were, in the valley. And we got another machine gun nest the same way, and we took those 2 fellows prisoner and put my hands up to be silent. I didn't want them to start yelling or anything. So I sent them back with the third man in my patrol back to headquarters, company headquarters, and we kept going till we got to the end of the wooded area, and I could look down into the whole valley, and I could see locations of the big guns that they had in the valley there. And there wasn't any way I could measure them in feet, but I could I know a football field was 100 yards, which is 300 feet. So I estimated the distance from the edge of the hill to the first gun, and I could estimate how many football fields it was out there. And then I took that and I could measure in football fields how the guns were spaced, and they had them about 1,000 feet, about 3 football fields and so forth apart. And I had a sketch pad with me, and I sat up there and I made a whole sketch of the area. It was all through, so we went back, and same way we came, and I got back, and the whole operation was about an hour, maybe a little more than an hour.
Wow, and you had 2 nests and you got them back?
Got 2 machine gun nests, and I got this nice sketch of the location of 3 of the big guns. And was thinking about 4 or 5 days later, the 7th Army decided to move forward, and they came through, and I was told to stay in my foxhole with my machine gun in case the Germans repelled us and would send us out, and we had to retreat. Our troops were retreating. I was there to
withdrawal cover.
But the whole day went by, and I got out of my machine gun hole because it froze, and I couldn't pull the machine gun. You had to pull the lever back to get a bullet in the chamber. But it was frozen. I couldn't open it. I took my rifle and I hit the end of it, and then broke off. It was so cold it broke off the handle.
Good boy.
So the machine gun was useless. So I got out of my foxhole and went to another foxhole. I said, well, I'll stay over here today and help you in case I need you. So at the end of the day, our troops went forward and the Germans retreated. So I went back to my foxhole to get my personal things out because we were going to move forward also. And a mortar shot had a direct hit on my location, on my position during the day, with the fighting back and forth. And my gun was 100 pieces all over the place, and all my private, personal stuff that I had left in the foxhole, that was all scattered around. I couldn't find my little Bible that my New Testament Bible that I had, the GI Bible. So I just was lucky that I had gotten out of there that day.
You weren't there.
Yeah. And that was the end of that whole thing. Their troops went back and our troops advanced. And then we went back down the mountain, and the infantry, 28th Division, I think it was, the battalion of the infantry took over and took forward positions then.
Now, did you ever find out that when you put your sketches and so forth back up to headquarters, did they use it or use it to plan out? You know,
that's what they did.
Any
yes.
read back?
And that's eventually they awarded me the Bronze Star for that, and I have a recording of that.
Yeah,
here.
I'd like to read that.
Yeah.
Hey, get your dog tags out of there. This is a copy of the citation. Oh, it's old, like me, okay? Headquarters, 21st Corps, Office of the Corps Commander, APO 101 U.S. Army. Date 2 June 1945. Subject, Award of Bronze Star Medal. 2, Corporal Donald N. Williams, serial number Blumpty Scratch, Corps of Engineers, Company A, 290th Engineering Combat Battalion, United States Army. Quote, by direction of the President and under the provisions of Army Regulation such and such, Donald M. Williams, Corporal, Corps of Engineers, is awarded the Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service in connection with military operations against an enemy of the United States during the period January 1945 through February 45 in France. Corporal Williams led a daylight patrol across extremely hazardous terrain covered with deep snow and captured 2 machine gun emplacements. skillfully leading his patrol against the heavily fortified enemy position, Corporal Williams directed his men with methodical determination, although subjected to harassing fire of enemy mortars. After penetrating the enemy defense sufficiently deep to obtain accurate information, he returned with well-organized factual information and 4 German prisoners. The results produced by Corporal Williams' actions were of great value to higher headquarters and reflected great credit upon himself and the United States Army. Enter military service from Hillside, New Jersey. Signed, F.W. Milburn, Major General, U.S. Army Commanding. Pretty damn good for a little
That's
kid
it.
in the country. Now,
Yeah.
we're not well organized to this, but these are his dog tags. Now, as far as I know, you're supposed to leave them. You're never supposed to carry them any place. But they clink like mad. Remember how you used to keep them covered? Good souvenirs.
Well, I had them on my inside of my shirt. So.
Okay. Now, and as a follow-up, this is a little brochure they had from his battalion. On the inside, they have listed all the various people who had citations, Purple Heart, Silver Stars, and so on. And let me get down here.
My name's on the last page.
Yeah, I know. Here we are. Number 1 on top of the list just happens to be Sergeant
Well, I was a sergeant by
Donald
then.
M. Williams, Company A, January to February 1945 in France.
Mm.
Good deal, my boy. Now, where did you go next as you kept going across? When did you start using your bridge building activities?
Well, we went back off the mountain after the divisions moved forward, and then we started doing our engineering work, putting up pontoon bridges. If it was going to be a tank crossing, and the river was too wide to put a Bailey Bridge up, because a Bailey Bridge was something you put together as erector sets,
And slide it up.
and then you had the sections were on rollers.
Yeah.
And then the company of troops would get behind and push to get the bridge over the gap.
Mm-hmm.
But you always had to have at least one section on the land more than you had going over the river. Otherwise, the thing would fall into the river. So we would put one section together and maybe put 2 sections of bridge back on the land. So when we pushed, the company pushed, we always had more weight on the land than we did hanging over the river.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get it over the other side, and then we disconnect the ones.
Well, how'd you get the first piece out on pontoons? Because everything is cantilevered. You got a heck of a load out there.
No, this was a Bailey Bridge. This was the one that you put together, the big steel sections.
Oh, okay. All right.
The other type of bridge was a pontoon bridge.
Yeah.
It was like little boats filled up with air, and we would put tracks on the top of the pontoon bridge,
For a roadbed, yeah.
roadbed.
Yeah.
And
Now, you run the fire a lot of times if you get it out there before the other guys
Yeah,
come in.
we were.
Talk about that. It's not a
Well,
picnic.
we were very fortunate. Our company didn't lose anybody putting the bridges up, but we were as A company, B company. They were halfway across the bridge putting a Bailey Bridge up, and they got hit with mortar fires, and it destroyed the bridge and killed all the guys that were working on the bridge. At that time, they lost about 12 guys on that one bridge that they were trying to put up. But we were fortunate enough we got our bridge ups, the
Okay.
ones that we put up. We weren't fired on while we were putting them up,
You're lucky.
so we were
The
fortunate. there.
quartermaster was able to keep you supplied as you kept going?
Yes, they did a tremendous job. I don't know how they did it, but they kept us with supplies.
Yeah.
The sections of bridge that we had to put up, they always had it there on
The
time.
right hardware?
Yep. And the sections must have weighed about 400 pounds, because it took 4 men to pick up one section of bridge. And we had a straight bar that we put through. It had a name, I forget what it was now. But we did 2 men on the back of the section, and then 2 men on the front of the section. And they picked the section up, it weighed 400 or 500 pounds, and walk it up to the next section that's being erected, that was being,
And then shove it out.
and they would put it on, and we'd have another section put on the land, and then the company would get there, 100 men or more, and push the thing out, the whole
They didn't have
section.
bulldozers or anything like that, trucks?
Yeah, but they didn't have them always on every,
I know, I'm just being nosy.
yeah. Yeah, but it was a hand-erected
All right.
thing, the Bailey Bridge was. But we put them all up, and at the end of the war, we had to take them down.
Well, you also did mine work, didn't you? Yeah, clearing roadways of mines and
Yeah,
planting them and picking them up.
At one point, we were about 25 miles from the Rhine River. I don't remember the name of the town it was now, but we had cleared all the mines off the roads heading towards the Rhine that day, because as the Germans retreated, they mined the roads.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we got up there, and our company went all over those roads and picked up all those mines and stacked them or took them away. They weren't so they weren't used for the Germans. And that night, on one section of road, a German squad had hidden in the woods during the daytime. And at nighttime, they came out and remined the same road that we had picked up the mines off that day.
They redid what you undid.
And I was sent out that night, 3 or 4 o'clock in the, no, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was pitch black, to go over these roads to make sure that they were clear, because the tanks were going to come over the next day. And I got to this one section, I could see a truck was on fire. Supply truck was on fire. So I told the Jeep driver, stop, and I'm going to go up and check it out. So I walked, it was only about 100 feet ahead. So I walked up, and the truck had, the 2.5-ton supply truck had gone over a mine and blown up, and the driver was not in it, in the truck. He had somehow gotten out, and I don't know where he was. But the truck was burning, and all the supplies that were in the back of the truck, they were all burning too. So I walked back to my Jeep. I told the Jeep driver, turn around, we got to go back and report this, because we've got to get a squad of men out here to go over these roads now and remine them. Demine them.
Demine them, yeah.
And and I was standing about, from here, about maybe 10 feet away from the Jeep, and he turned around, and he started to turn his Jeep around. And as he turned his wheels to the left and went forward, he hit another mine that we couldn't see because it was so dark. And it blew me over into a ditch. And the windshield of the Jeep went through and hit him in the face. And I could hear him, I don't know how long I was in the ditch, but when I got out, I could hear him yelling and screaming. And I went and got him out of the Jeep, and he was all blood. His face was all bloody. But I
Did
walked.
you get nailed too, didn't you?
I got nailed too, but I could walk. And so I walked back to an intersection, and there was another truck coming by, a supply truck, that picked us up and took us back to aid station. And they took him in one direction, and they took me in another direction, and maybe he had died by that time. But me, they took to another first aid section, and they patched me up just to stop the bleeding. And
So where were you hit? The side, the face?
side and stomach,
Oh, okay.
and my arm.
Did you get it all out?
Not there. They sent me back to a field hospital to do that.
Okay.
And in the field hospital, they took all the shrapnel out of me and sent me back to a station hospital.
How
For
long was this
permanent.
in time? A couple of days, a couple of weeks?
Well, the field aid station was just a matter of an hour or so, a couple hours, and then the
Push
field
you in through.
station, I was there just overnight, and the next day I was sent back for a couple of days to the field station hospital,
Okay.
and I was there a month, and they patched me up and did everything else that they had to do,
Yeah, made you ready to return to duty.
but I was there a month,
Okay.
and during that month, the war was over. The Germans surrendered, and so by the time I got back to my own outfit, they were already into Germany, and actually they were at a town called Kunzelsloh, which is about 20 kilometers from Heidelberg. And there was a little river there that came off the Neckar River, and my company was stationed in this town, and our job that summer was to take the Bailey Bridge down that was across there and replace it with a wooden trestle bridge.
Oh,
And we spent the whole summer taking that Bailey Bridge down, because we had to take it down the same way you put it up, you know.
piece by piece by
Yeah.
piece.
And then we spent the rest of the summer building a Bailey.
And did the local people help you bridge, build it?
You know, the war was over, and the people were so genuinely
Excited.
happy to see us that they were doing everything they could to make us feel at home. And I was so impressed by the attitude of the German people. They were so glad that the war was over, and they did everything they could to help us. And
You ever go back to there visiting after the war was over?
I've been back to Heidelberg, but I
Okay.
haven't been back to
Kunzelsloh. Yeah.
Kunzelsloh.
When did you get home? How'd you get home?
They came home by number of points, and you get like so many points for every month in overseas,
Yeah.
and
And your medals add up too, you know.
they had added up too, and so I got, I think, 5 extra points for the Purple Heart and 5 extra points for the Bronze Star. By that time, I had the Bronze Star issued me over in.
I'm going to hold this up. Can you possibly see this? But we'll tell it later. That's a picture of Don and some of the other guys when they had their presentation of their awards.
And that's in Kunzelsloh, Germany.
Say that again.
Kunzelsloh.
Good for you too. Okay. Now that you're home, did you go back to school, take advantage of the GI Bill or anything like that?
Well, yeah. I came back on points. We came back on points. And the ones with the higher points got on came back earlier than the ones
yeah.
that didn't. So I had been accepted when I graduated from prep school. I had been accepted to Cornell and also to Bucknell, which is in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. So my brother was 4F. He had gotten injured playing football, and he got somebody put their finger in his eye and turned his eye inside out. So he wasn't in the service.
Anyway, how about you?
But he had graduated from Cornell, and I had been accepted there. So I went back after the war and went up to Ithaca. My brother went up, he drove me up, and he says, well, we'll go and get you settled up there at Cornell. Well, I went in, and they said, well, you're accepted because before you went in the service, we accepted you. But it's a New York State subsidized university, and we have to take New York State
Guys
residents
before you-
first.
Yeah, okay. It
So
makes
we
sense.
can't get you in for another semester. Well, I didn't want to wait another semester, so I went to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania at Bucknell, and they said, when do you want to start?
Tomorrow morning.
They put me in right away,
Good. What was your major?
mechanical engineering.
Okay. And what'd you do with that when you got through school?
I went into, started working for a company that couldn't use too much of my mechanical engineering, but But in ME, in college, you learn a little bit about the chemical engineers, a little bit about the other.
Enough to be dangerous.
You learn about everything. So I I went to work for a company, a steel company, Ryerson Steel, which is a division of Inland Steel. And I worked for them for 10 years in sales. And then I transferred, well, I was invited to join another competitor of Ryerson's, which was Bow Steel, which is a division of Davum Corporation, which is the largest steel manufacturers in France. They're comparable to U.S. Steel in this country. And they started a warehouse division, service center division in this country. And we had plants in New Jersey, North Carolina, Texas, Wichita, Kansas, Montreal. And so I went to work for Bow Steel, and their headquarters in New Jersey was in New Brunswick. And they were starting a lot of business in New England. And so they sent me up to Connecticut to start the New England division of Bow Steel. So and we covered all the states, New England states, Vermont,
Good.
New Hampshire, Maine.
Are you still in sales,
Massachusetts.
marketing, or?
Well, I was sent up there as a general manager, and then
Whoa.
before I retired, I became vice president of the corporation, in charge of the New England division.
Oh, good for you.
So, my education helped me a lot.
Oh, it always
And moving
will.
forward, yeah.
Now, let's go back just a little bit. Where along the line did you get married and start your family?
My junior year at Bucknell, a fraternity brother married a girl who was my wife's cousin in Jersey City. And that summer, between the junior and senior years, my some fraternity brothers went to the wedding. And at the reception, I was sitting next to this one gal, a cousin of the bride, and the waiter came along with martinis and Manhattans and
One of each or two of each?
well, I don't know how.
I don't know.
But Betty says, no, I don't drink anything. So he started to pick it up. I said, no, you can leave it here. I'll take care of it. I think it was a Manhattan or something. And so that's where I first met her, at the reception of one of her
Good.
cousins and a fraternity brother of mine. So after the party was over, a bunch of us were going out for a little while, and I said, well, look, would you like to come along with us? And she said, well, you'll have to ask my father. So I had to go over and ask her father,
For her
my
hand
mother.
or just with the boy?
And they said, all right, if you have home by 11 o'clock. So she said, okay. So that was our first date. And she lived in Staten Island then. So I took her back to Staten Island and got lost coming back to Elizabeth.
You drove?
Yeah, I had my car. But I got lost in Staten Island, but I finally got home. But
You must if you're here.
It went on from there, and she had her senior year at Skidmore and majored in art education. And and she finished that, and I had to go for my senior year at Bucknell. So we were married, and we went up to Lewisburg for my senior year. She was ahead of me in college because of war. I lost 4 years. And so she came up with me. We were married then, and she was the art teacher for the schools in Lewisburg because she had a degree in art education. And I was my senior year at Bucknell in mechanical engineering. And that's where it started. And we came back after the war, after I graduated, and that's when I started working.
Mm-hmm. And did you have a family? Like any offspring?
We
as
had
they say?
two boys, about 4 or 5 years apart. And then we wanted to have a daughter. Betty couldn't have any more children. So we adopted a little baby from Burlington, Vermont,
Good.
that was born at 3 pounds, so they wouldn't let her out till she got
Preemie.
to be really, yeah. But they let her out when she was 5 pounds.
And how are the kids doing today?
Well, my daughter is now 55 years old, and she lives in Maine. One boy is the oldest is Ray, and he lives in Connecticut, and he's 65 now.
Gonna retire pretty
66.
soon.
Yeah, he doesn't want to retire though. But
I know.
And my other son teaches at UNH,
Oh,
and he's 55, I guess now.
okay.
And that's my family. I lost my wife about 3 years ago with Alzheimer's.
You know, that's a nasty one.
It
I
is.
did the same thing, 5 for me.
Yep.
One question, if you will. All that you've seen and done and been a party to and been recognized, was your service experience a positive or negative impact on your life after that?
I would say it's a positive impact on my life. It's let me see the best and the worst.
Mhm.
I'm amazed still at the attitude and the reception we got in Germany after the war by the local people, who were so happy to see us because it meant the war was over.
Yeah.
And they lost people too.
Everybody did.
And all the Germans were not Nazis.
I know.
And they accepted us and helped us do everything they could to help us. And it was really, I really appreciated that. And it gave me a better insight on just how war affects different types of people. Different.
And more
yeah,
importantly, you become aware of what you're doing in life,
Absolutely.
okay?
Yeah.
3 words. Thank you, friend.
Thank
for
you,
your
Bob.
service and your interview today. It's
Thank
been
you.
fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap, folks. Again, if you have the desire and you'd like to come and do your show, you can find the address on the back of this show. We'd be more than glad to help you, and I know one thing. It'll probably be, if you do it, a priceless legacy to leave your family. Won't cost you a dime, but it'll be something you'll cherish and your family will cherish long after you. Again, Bob Stevens saying thank you, stay healthy, and keep in touch. Goodbye.